So welcome to week 2 of our new tutor training. Let's remind everybody about the road ahead. So here we are, May 27th. The theme today is going to be lesson design for goal attainment. It's going to be one of the main tools in your toolkit. You may not end up using it in the form you see today, but I hope it will give you some subconscious inspiration as to what is involved in the lesson planning process and how it guides you and your students towards what you're trying to achieve. Next week, we'll go into tools, more specifically, things like games, using screen share, using split screen, whiteboard apps, which exist both in Zoom or online. And after that, we'll go into some more things you can use for designing lessons, and we'll finish up week 5 with some concluding remarks. So, assignments. You know that each week you have to, we ask you to. Question. Can you see something that says, give subtitles a try? No?
It
Okay.
says assignments.
Assignments.
No. Just making sure. So, we provided you with a document that you could read, which might give you some inspiration on what is involved in the practice of teaching English. And everyone presented their questions, I believe. Were there any more from the readings?
I have more, but I'll wait and I'll just talk to them throughout the...
We'll wait till the end, because we have an opportunity at the end. We'll see how fast we can get through this. So we are now looking at what's happening after week 2. I'm asking you to visit one of our online Zoom classes. So let's screen share what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to go to my web browser, which is, let me go ahead and, you know what? Forget about it. Hello, YouTube. This is my inbox. So, this is our homepage. Just like you registered for the training here, we have automatic registrations for these classes. You have the option of adding it to your calendar. Since this is a one-time thing, you can just register to access the link, and you don't have to attend every week. We have a class on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can choose one, and the assignment is just to observe, take some notes, and we'll discuss it next time. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. Keep moving. So, switching the screen share to the slideshow. Okay, we did this. This is the assignment review. Our topic for today is the theory of lesson planning, a tool to achieve goals step by step. It's going to be 6 components. So we are embarking on a journey to achieve a very large goal. And the way to achieve that is one step at a time. We'll look at what a step is in this context and its components. After that, we'll put it together in context so we can see how it gets you where you want to go. Then we'll talk about activities, which are basically the components of that step. And we'll review what you now have in your toolbox. So how to handle big goals. A lot of goals in life are not something that you can complete in a single hour or even a single day. You're going to have to take a very long time perspective in order to build it. And the example I have on this page is a bodybuilder, just because I think you can understand if you wanted to put in all the work and damage he did at a good pace to yourself in a single day, it probably wouldn't be possible. If you did, you would be dead. Even if you don't go that far and you train too hard, you can look at people who talk about how much you should train, and they'll show you a graph that There's a peak of how much you train, and then there's a descent. That's diminishing returns. Same thing when you cook a steak. How is your muscle after the workout? Well, you went from being at a good degree of being cooked that you have flavor and tenderness to now you're burnt, and it's not going to be good for anybody. So how is it done that you achieve one of these goals that requires you to work over a very long period of time, basically run this marathon? I say that you have to be a master of accumulation. And when you are accumulating skill, for example, there is a rate at which you are taking things in, which you have to control in opposition to a rate at which you are losing something or damaging something. The fitness example is very easy to understand. When you are exercising, you achieve this by applying a stress to yourself. There is necessarily a rate of degradation to your body that you must not overexceed, that you can't heal between workouts. For learning, it might simply be don't do it to the point that you're stressed or you start neglecting your family. You have now some kind of temper problem because you can't control the goals in your life. That's the rate of degradation in learning context. But the rate of dissipation is like the natural rate that you lose something. If you become strong and then you stop exercising, you will slowly become weak. So when you are training, think about these two competing forces. The wear and tear that you are doing on yourself through the training and avoiding going soft by neglecting training. You have to maintain the balance between the two. Now, a big goal, like we said, you can't do all at once. So another saying we have that I think applies to the situation is don't bite off more than you can chew. Take a bite that's reasonable, chew it, and then move on. So if you recall last lesson, we talked about the gym concept of training. In order to achieve your goal, you have to have those two things, sustainability and continuity, plus intensity. Find that balance. I showed you the link to the videos online. If you want to review those concepts, they're on the online training page. So here we have one of the principal slides of today's lesson. It's a 3-step process to tackle a big accumulation goal. The philosophy behind it is one step at a time in the right direction. So when you have a big goal, like learning a language, or maybe you're a programmer and you have to design some sort of software which does many different things and interacts with each other, when you are about to tackle that big goal, you have to look at the big picture and break it into small parts. Because if you can complete the parts, it's something you can wrap your head around, first of all, but then you can put them together. I have a note underneath it which says arrange progressively. The reason I say that is you don't always want to start with the most difficult or complicated task, especially if your ability to complete that part of your big goal depends on your skill, which you acquire in completing the simpler parts. So if you have a big goal like speaking fluent English, that might require you to be able to write an academic paper for a university. Before you tackle that project, which you could do by writing it in your native language and then translating it word for word, it's possible, could be done. Probably you should look at something which is smaller, like writing a letter to your friend or writing in a journal about your day using your new language. If you do that over a period of time, you will have experience writing and you can then apply it to something more substantial, like an academic paper. So that's part one. Part two, then you can work towards your component objectives with incremental training sessions. We compared learning a language or working with our students like going to the gym and you're the personal trainer. So if you want to tackle these components, find a program, design a weekly training schedule, and stick to it. Then again, you have to look a little closer. What is inside that training session? That's step three. Break incremental training sessions into incremental activities. When you're training the body, there might be a different order than when you're training for your mind. You might start with enough to warm yourself up and then do the hardest thing first, the big lift, and then do something which complements it. If you're doing heavy bench press, the next thing you might do is flies because it will train the muscle in a different way. Applying that principle to language, I'm actually going to put the most difficult thing last in the model you'll see today. But again, arrange these things progressively basically means in a logical order. If there's a reason why you put the most difficult thing first, it's a good reason, by all means. If there's a reason why you put the most difficult thing last, great. You have creative freedom here. Okay, let's take a stop. Any questions at this point? All right, let's move on. So let's focus on learning a language because what we talked about could apply to various goals. As far as language, this is the unit lesson I want to impart to you today. It's a good structure. It's not the only structure. So let's take a second just to look at it. And I'll be silent for about a minute just so you can observe this slide. All right. So let me ask you the first question on the right. Where does the list start?
Looks like it starts at the bottom.
Good observation. According to the numbers. Yeah, I'll explain why. When we started this presentation, we talked about the goal. And usually the goal is something about where you're not. It's in the future and far away. So I arranged the lesson with that goal component at the top, but it's where you're going to go from the beginning of the lesson. So when you are planning your lesson, I suggest that you start with what you want to achieve that time. Ask yourself, what is the objective of this lesson? What do I want my student to do? Language is something useful. We probably want them to use it in their real life. That's why the last component should be something that's mock reality, like a conversation, a job interview, a appointment with the doctor, something that would actually help them. Then what we see in the progression is the easiest thing is where we start so that they can basically grasp the concept of this item. It could be vocabulary. So here are some new words. That's your introductory presentation. Then you start to ask them to use it. The mechanics could be, well, what does it mean? What are some example sentences? Can you read it? Do you understand it? Then they can try making examples. If it's a theme, like you have a theme about, oh, these are vocabulary that you can use at the hospital. Then you can design something for Mechanics 3 and free practice where they are trying to form sentences in that kind of situation. So what would you have to say at the hospital? Or if you have a class, one student could be a certain role, like the doctor, one could be the sick person, one could be the parent who brought the child, for example. But the idea is you introduce the content, then progressively make the student more familiar with using it until it leads to something where they're basically using it as if they were in a real situation. So let's talk about 0 and 1. The human interest component is basically just, if you are meeting your students, probably you will not just sit down and say, okay, let's get started. You'll say, oh, how are you? How was your week? Just like we did when we were trying to get everything up and running. Oh, so why did you decide to do this? How was your week since we last met? That is basically just developing a good relationship with the client. I know when I've taught online that I've had really great lessons from a professional standpoint where we covered a lot of material, and the feedback and adjustments that I was able to give to the students, I could tell were being appreciated. But for whatever reason, I was serious that day. And it was just like, hello, next, you know. So that person didn't come back, even though the lesson itself was really good. So how do you build that long-term client relationship? It's the human interest. Contextualize is an interesting idea. Probably it's not best to start the learning process out of nowhere. You kind of want to talk about the purpose, how this is useful, ask how much they actually understand about the subject in the first place. We talked about how the brain makes connections in order to learn. Theoretically, if you contextualize the learning experience, the recording of what they're about to learn takes place in association with what they already know. So if I contextualize something about, you remember when we did this last time, now we're going to take it to the next level. So when they recall this new thing, or when they recall the previous thing, there's a link and an association. I'm not a neuroscientist, but this is as far as I understand. Memory works by connection. So when you contextualize something, it provides a link. Same thing when I gave you the images of the well-done steak. Maybe from now on, when you think about overcooking something, you can think about training too hard. Just making that image connection in your brain. Okay, so let's ask again, where does the list start? How about Ruth?
Oh man. I'm still thinking the bottom.
There's probably not a wrong answer to this question. So yeah, great job. It starts with the human interest. According to the progression of time, yes, the beginning of the lesson is at the bottom. Okay. Who wants to give another answer? Because remember I said there's more than one answer to this. How about Tom?
Well, I mean, I would have agreed in the sense that, if you can't, you have to develop a rapport with the student. I think that, as you illustrated by your example, I mean, if you can just, let's say, if you're just off that day for whatever reason, a lot of times it can come off. But I think the contextualize, to give it, how is it useful? This is what we're going to do. Now, maybe that also, because you really haven't gotten to you know, I mean, with the introductory presentation, but I mean, I'm going to guess 1.
Very good. So yeah, where does the learning begin? In connection to what you already know. Awesome. So how about Barbara? Do you want to give a third answer?
Well, where does the lesson begin? I guess you could say it would be introductory presentation, because that's when you're actually starting the lesson part.
Okay. So I'll give the other option. It starts with your objective. The list starts with the thing that you're trying to achieve. We said that was this mock reality. What do you want your student to be able to do in the real world after your lesson? So every answer everyone gave was correct according to time and importance. I think that this is a creative activity. So when you are painting a picture, you will probably be going back and forth between various parts.
Mm.
So if you start with an objective, then you can make the beginning and you say, you know, I can adjust it this way, and so on. Okay, great. What is the direction of intensity?
I think it's starting from the bottom and going up until you're actually doing the conversation with the mock reality.
I agree. That's right. The logic behind this lesson structure is to become more intense towards the end of the lesson. It's not necessarily the only way, but it's a good way. Okay, what is the purpose of each piece? Let's start with 0. What is the purpose of 0?
Human interest.
Well, I guess again, to establish a connection between yourself and the student, you know, so that, I don't know, that there's a more of a personal aspect to it.
Yeah, it probably makes the time better for everybody. Right. Number 1.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go in a circle. How about that? So that will go to Barbara.
Oh, contextualize. That is so that the person who's learning has something to connect it to. They'll learn it better if they can connect it with something they already know.
Exactly. All right. Number 2, that goes to Ruth.
Oh. I think well, it tells the student what they're going to be learning, and it's the plan. I mean, so they're connecting it to what they've previously learned, but then you give them a little explanation of what you're planning to do that day.
Very nice. Just to add a little bit, because I didn't say this before, probably you don't want to do all the talking as the teacher. The student could tune out at any time. So the introductory presentation is the most talking you will do, and basically you're just trying to, this is what we're doing, this is how it works, okay, let's get down to business. Because only by actually doing it will the student integrate it into something they can use. I don't know if there are any geniuses who can read a book on grammar. This one, I read this the first time, I couldn't speak Russian, so I had to work with it for a long time. You learn by doing. And then that was writing. So I did that for a while, and only after that did I start to speak. And things that I could do on paper, I couldn't do with my voice. It's a pretty interesting thing. Okay, so that was Ruth. We'll go to Tom for number 3.
Annex 1, warm-up. I guess it would be that, I mean, just as, you know, you were talking about the analogy with the, you know, with the gym theory or gym application, I mean, I guess you're trying to start the depending on what obviously what the focus of the lesson is on. You know, you're starting with the kind of the easy stuff. You know, you're basically, you know, feeling out the capabilities as well as you know, not trying to blow the student out of the water. I guess. I mean, I don't know whether that is right.
Yes, it's very true. For whatever reason, it seems that the brain kind of works the same way as a muscle. It's a lot easier to warm up than just jump into the deep end of the training. Okay, Barbara, for number 4.
Number 4, I guess that's where you're getting the student to actually say it. You told them what you're going to be doing. Now you want them to try it.
Yeah. Basically, it's just a progression of intensity. You're exactly right. Okay. Ruth, for number 5.
They're continuing to try the different exercises. You're encouraging them, I would say, and then just, you don't want to correct them, I don't think, but you just keep on saying or saying correctly what you're trying to communicate, or showing them to fine-tune whatever they've done.
Fine-tune, I like that. Yes, because during this process, you will be able to hear what they are saying, and it gives you an opportunity to correct not just what you're learning today, but everything they've learned. It's basically the student's brain is growing like a plant, and it could grow in any kind of crazy direction, but you're the master gardener, and you're going to make the English how we say it. Because language is a lot about style. You know, we talk today not like we did even a decade ago, certainly not like 100 years ago. So basically, you're trying to trim the style. And as an individual, the student is never required to actually speak that way, but you are informing them how English is spoken in a certain region. So interestingly, working with students and talking about how English works every day, there are some times that I want to say things in English in ways that are completely unusual, but I like them because I think they're better. But still, when you develop the ability to make the choice, and that's what you're giving the student the power to do, you should choose to say it this way because the other person will understand. Okay, let's go on to number 6.
All right, free practice. I think you got it. I mean, I'm guessing that this would more be the point at which you're positively reinforcing correct responses and you know, encouraging the student kind of in preparation for number 7. You know, I think this is, you know, I think you can do this, be it the doctor's appointment, be it whatever application in practical life that they're looking to do. You know, I think you're just about ready to do that. I mean, maybe that's it.
Good point. Yeah. So at this point, the student can confidently use it without a lot of control because the scenarios you might have made in the earlier activities might have been very simple. Now this, you've basically given them a little more freedom. When you get to the next one, I don't want to say it, so I'll steal Barbara's thunder. Well, why don't we let Barbara go first? So when you get to 7, what's happening?
7, I guess, is where they would be forming their own sentences, and you give them a situation, and then they have to come up with the words for it. They have to come up with how they would do it.
Basically, yeah, they have complete creative freedom in this mock situation. Okay, great job. Any questions before we move on? How are we doing on time? Despite all, we're ahead of schedule. So, putting it all together, lessons are in sequence, week by week. So you will run this in sequence. Each individual lesson is laddered, so it goes up from the beginning to some achievement, and then you're at that new point. Now it's time to go to the next level. And again, you'll have your other lesson. You go to the next level. When we began this presentation, we talked about the one step at a time. So you're going in your one step at a time, climbing up towards your larger goals, the components of your big goal, which in turn are working towards the whole, your final goal. So, number one, an individual lesson climbs to a reality-based and practical goal. Number two, individual lessons in sequence climb towards longer-term goals. And number three, life goes on while this occurs and interacts with and influences the training process. You probably know that in life, you might start something and something happens, and now you have to go a completely different way. So maybe you started learning a language many years ago and you never finished. Spanish for me. I started learning Spanish in high school and I went to college. I didn't do it, and that was it. At the same time, for our students, this is relevant because their needs will evolve over this process. And you might be required to, I shouldn't say required, you might identify that if we do a lesson based on this situation that you're experiencing now, it will help you immediately. So you can choose what the objective and what the most important thing to learn is as you are working with your student. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so let's take out the magnifying glass and look closely at the lesson. We said that the steps are your training sessions, and within the training session, you have component activities. From last lesson, we talked about how speaking for communication is the most essential component.
Mhm.
It will integrate all the grammatical system, all the vocabulary, and basically is that form where they are communicating in real time. It's the best way to learn the language. Now, lesson design, as we've seen it today, is required in the classroom. I would not recommend going to the class without a plan. It's not going to work very well, especially because you have too many variables to control and you have to meet the needs of many people, not just one person. It's a lot easier to tailor yourself to meeting an individual versus meeting an audience of 25 people. That said, there's an advantage to the classroom and language teaching, which is there's an opportunity for the classmates to communicate with each other. In the context of English teaching, it could be that these students are from various countries and their only common language is English, which forces communication in that language. It's a pretty awesome thing. And over time, the correct English that the students know will be experienced by the people they're working with. So it's like one big melting pot of what they've learned, which is pretty awesome. Sometimes it requires time for that process to happen. I taught in a language school in New York, but it was a summer program. So students were coming in and leaving on a 1 week or 2 week basis. So the amount of time that they imparted their language or absorbed language from others might not have been substantial enough to really get to the bottom of it or create that shared identity in the classroom. But no trouble. So when you are choosing your activities, I have a question that you should ask yourself before you plan it. You write it down in your schedule. That is, Does the activity require spoken communication? If it does not, I do not recommend it because probably you have a better option. As I say in the first bullet point, otherwise you may be wasting the opportunity of the social setting. There are all kinds of ways you can study a language. I have here, I've shown you before, my flashcards. This is great for me to do by myself. But if I took this to a classroom and sat in the corner and did it there, what was the point of going to the class? Maybe I like people. I mean, that's fine. But probably I paid. And you don't want to waste your time doing that. So if you think this form of training will help you, you're willing to pay for it, or people are willing to spend time to come there, probably you should participate and participate in that spoken communication. So same thing when you're meeting your student, choose the thing that they can't do by themselves. And I'm not saying don't read, because I told you how much reading with a native Russian speaker helped me, because I would have pronounced every other word incorrectly if they weren't there. So yes, you will probably benefit them regardless of what you do, but there might be a best thing to do. So always ask yourself, does the activity require spoken communication? Okay, questions? Let's talk about what you can now do. Number one, break your students' goals into incremental steps. 2, design a professional lesson which can stack to reach a big goal. I'm serious about that. I paid $3,000 to get my certificate, which required many weeks to do. And basically, the fruit of that you have received today. Now go out and use it. There's value to a certificate because, you know, you can just put it on your resume and say, see, proof, I did it. Now let me in. But the value, I'm telling you, this is it. Okay, number 3, discard activities which are best done independently in favor of activities which require communication. So 1, 2, 3, you can do that. You can help your student. You can help them achieve their goal. Okay, so what is this? This is basically a tool. Because of it, you won't get lost or go in circles. If you're wondering why your student is not making progress, take a step back to this. You need to make that ladder to where you need to go. If you use a logical lesson structure, which is progressive and incremental, you're taking one step at a time in the right direction. And the only thing standing between your student and finishing is the process of growth, which is time. Okay? The client is building the muscle. You're the personal trainer, so you can't lift the weights for them. Same way, you're just giving them the structure. They have to form the sentences. They have to practice communication. Okay, you are the guide, the expert, and the resource, free to teach as you like. I gave you a good lesson structure, not the only one. Okay, so take your client in the direction of their goals from where they are. So wherever you are now, which way do I go from here? What's step 1? We said the role of the personal trainer is to identify where the client is. Yes, maybe they want to become very, very athletic, but in their present condition, if we jump into the regimen that an athlete does, this person will hurt themselves. I won't be doing them any good. I won't be doing myself any good by asking them to do this. In a learning project, you might be ruining their confidence if you do something which is too hard. Or if you're not supportive, you say, okay, so you want to do this? Let's start here. Oh, you can't handle it? Well, they won't be back. So, questions? believe Ruth had some questions, and we're
Oh,
doing well on time. So if you'd like, you can ask them at this point.
yeah, hold on. I think we answered that. Uh, I was just wondering, so have your current tutors, I mean, are they using Zoom with their clients?
A lot of our volunteers are elderly, and it was difficult to transition. There was a need for us to provide technology training in this situation, and no one was prepared for it. But yes, since we've been at home, we have a good number of tutors and teachers who are offering classes and who are meeting with their students regularly. Some of them actually are still meeting face in person in a responsible way. So with proper social distance, the same way I'm assuming all of us have seen friends 6 feet apart, for example. So yes, we have continued. Zoom is one of the options, but I do recommend other options like Skype and Google Hangouts. Google Meet, I think, is the one that is competing with Zoom.
Is there, I guess I was just curious to see what the feedback was, or if anybody even had any feedback. I know it's all such a new normal, but with students and the tutors, I mean, I guess learning's like something better. Have they found one thing to be better than the other? I mean, we're doing this. This is my first time. I mean, I have, like with my friends, I've had, you know, meetings, but this is my first learning online. So I'm not familiar with this at all. So I was just curious if there have been any learnings about how to go about it.
As far as feedback, people have talked about the materials they found useful, but there's so many that you have a lot to choose from. So it seems that they found what they liked and what their students liked, and they had no problem. Online teaching is not new for English because people are trying to advance their careers. So as you know, I teach English every day online, and as from what they've said, for example, I talked with a nurse from South Korea today who learned English for about 12 years, but really appreciated and reported that since she has been using the platform I teach with for about 5 months, that her progress was very significant. That before she was not confident speaking, and now that she has used video chat to practice, that she's gone to this level where we're having conversations, which is pretty awesome. Okay, great questions.
I don't want to, you guys have questions? I don't want to interrupt.
Someone else jump in. All right, tag out.
Oh, I have more questions. Well, the first week seemed to cover a lot about English as a second language, and I didn't know whether, is this more geared to English as a second language or basic literacy, or what are the most?
Good question. So we serve the needs of our community, and we have been in operation for a long time. As circumstances have changed, what we offer to the community at this point is by and large English as a second language. You saw Tammy's presentation about everything we've continued to offer over that time. Reading to children, offering computer classes, or GED skills, which we do. If someone comes in with a need and we can satisfy the need at the time, we're happy to help. But the vast majority of what we do is now this English teaching.
Okay.
Does that meet everyone's expectations when you were volunteering?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good question.
Now, you may have answered this, Tim, in your kind of what you were last saying prior to Ruth's question, but why, you know, to me, being relatively, I mean, very relatively new to this whole Zoom thing, like I imagine the majority of people are, why do you recommend one platform? You know, you said something about Google, you know, Skype, or what? I mean, to me, I mean, to the layman here, you know, either I can see or I can't. You know, I mean, what is really, you know, I mean, it's kind of, I'm, you know, being a little overly pragmatic, but it's, I mean, so is it just the tools that they offer on that particular app or you know, just going forward, I was just curious.
I don't want to stick people with a single recommendation uh, for our organization. There's an advantage that we could say, oh, we use Zoom, right? Everybody here uses Zoom. Right? If you don't use Zoom, you're not part of the club. But from my experience today and from using Zoom over this period, I don't particularly like it. I think it's not easy to understand where things are. I made a comparison before, I think, with Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere for video editing. When I used Adobe Premiere, it was so easy for me to do the video projects because I could think, oh, how do I do this? You know, probably it's here. Oh, good, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so easy to find. And then when I'm doing Final Cut Pro, I'm like, it's like magic. Like, how do I figure out how to make this thing go? And for me, there was no logical connection as to why something would be located in a certain place, or there was no clear explanation to find where something would be. Same thing with the Zoom. When I open up the screen share, I'm like, it's like 6 pages. It's like, I have 2 things that I can like keep track of. Why are there 6 options for me to share? It kind of just like, you know, you have to like look closely, you have to squint your eyes. Ah, okay, thanks. Same thing with host settings. That threw us for a loop today, so, you know, I'm not pleased about it. Skype, I've never had a problem with, though stability-wise and some other features like the style, I'm not really a big fan of the style, but as far as just simplicity, Skype worked for me. That's probably why where I teach now keeps everything in its own web page. So it's not like, oh, schedule here and then use Skype if you want. It's like we have our own video chat system, our own chat system, our own message system, our own reservation system. That way, everyone's on the same page.
Is that literacy volunteers that everybody does that, or is that where you work?
It's where I work.
Oh, okay.
But you know, depending how advanced we can make the literacy volunteers.
Okay.
We were talking, I believe. This might have been when we were trying to get you connected, Ruth, or maybe it was before. That it would be great if we could offer availability from the tutors and have students within our network reserve spots. I think that'd be very efficient instead of the matching process. Because if it's not a good match, then you have to start over. Or if the student moves, for example, then you're waiting.
Does that mean you would have different students that you wouldn't be consistently with one person, or?
Based on posting availability, yes, it would probably mean that you could have more than one person. I've taught more than one student according to the previous method. So I would teach 2 students and meet with them in person. And you're free to do the same. Traditionally, what we've had is a match of 1-to-1, so 1 tutor with 1 student.
Mm-hmm.
And
but you wouldn't have like a different one every week. That would be crazy.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. How would you be able to assess where they're at instantly if you didn't know them each week?
Hello, my name is Tim. Where are you from? What? And then, I see where you are. Yeah, it's a good question. If you remember from the previous lesson, we had principles about what is really required to create a good result for your student. It was patience, sincere interest, desire to understand what they're saying, clarity of communication. So if you can calibrate yourself in the meeting, that's fine. And I don't think it's easier than it looks. or easier than it sounds. You just meet them, you ask simple questions like, how are you? And you can try to understand, oh, this person's pretty good for speaking English, and we can have a conversation at this level. Or you can keep it lower. How was your day? You did this. Oh, is that your favorite movie? And so on. That's for conversation. But yes, as far as attaining their goal, probably unless you're a expert consultant on, based on my experience, this is the training program you should do. It might be a little difficult. So yes, normally we do have one student long-term with one tutor. Okay, let's move on to the review section. Now that we've put enough time between you and the learning, let's try and
remember.
Yeah. So, finish this sentence. Long-term goals require you to be a master of what?
That's true.
Accumulation.
Accumulation.
That's right, accumulation. Great job. Okay, next one. What are the 3 steps in the 3-step process to tackle a big accumulation goal?
Break it into
Break it.
Yeah, we broke it down. We had 3 steps.
incremental training.
What was that, Ruth?
Incremental training.
Mm-hmm.
And incremental activities.
Mm-hmm. That's 2.
Oh, progressive, arranged progressively.
Those were those were like notes, but yes, great job. Let's go back to the slide. So, impressed. I knew that would be it. Here it is. Okay. So, break the big objective into component objectives, I think is what we were missing. Then you will work towards these with incremental training sessions, your once or twice a week gym session, for example. Then in the gym session, you're doing different exercises. Those are your incremental activities. Okay, awesome. Okay, now, what is the first step in the unit lesson model?
Human interest.
That's great. Okay. And we talked about how there were more than one answer. So what was another option?
Contextualize.
Yeah, just to make sure it connects to what they already know. What, in your planning process, what should you think about?
Where does the lesson begin, and what's the objective of it all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where are you going? It's not just where to start, but where you want to go. Direction is important because you can walk in circles. Okay, awesome job. What is the direction of intensity in the unit lesson model? This is the one that we showed today. What was the direction of intensity?
That was from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
The
Beginning,
steps.
exactly right. Beginning of the lesson towards the end, it became harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
Next. What is the classroom advantage for language learning? Tom.
The opportunity to communicate with each other, other students, or classmates.
Exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. Okay. Choosing your activities. Always ask yourself.
You should always ask if it requires spoken communication.
Mm-hmm. Right. If it doesn't, probably you have a better option. So you say, oh, I want to do this. Do you? Is there not something better you could choose? Because probably your student could do it by themselves. Maybe. Okay. What are the 3 things you can now do?
Things you can now
Break students' goals and incremental steps.
Mm-hmm.
Design a lesson.
Mm-hmm. Professional, like I said.
Professional.
$3,000. Here we go. This is what we call philanthropy.
professional volunteer lesson.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what was the last one? Basically, we just talked about it. You can discard activities that don't require spoken communication in favor of ones that do. Okay. Last one. What is the assignment to complete before next week?
Oh, we have to attend a meeting.
Mm-hmm. Go to the home page and you can register. You don't have to add it to your calendar. And we have 3 options. The Monday class at 6:30 p.m., the Wednesday class at 12:30 p.m., and the Thursday class at 10 a.m. Those are your options. You attend it, and what do you do?
Take
Take
notes.
notes.
Yep, and we'll discuss it afterwards. Anything else? Any other things I ask you to do?
We have to read the week 3
Yeah.
and
That's right.
come up with a question.
Yep, just like last time, take a look at it. If you have any questions, this is an opportunity to ask. It's a resource for you, just like I Speak English. That book is a resource for you.
Okay.
So remember, you can go to the center and pick that up anytime you like.
Great.
Good.
Yep. And that's it. Great job.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Of course, I'm glad that with all of that, think about it. It only took us an hour. So I'll see you same time next week.
Must be the students.
Yeah, great job. With the
Advantage of a
kinks
small class.
ironed out. Yep. So I'll see you.
Wait, I don't have the new link. You're gonna send it to us again, or?
We'll fix that and I'll send it. Okay?
Thank you.
Of course. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Okay. Let's see, where's the lead? Meet.
Okay, so let's do record. That was where.